In just a moment, we'll be in the book of Malachi, if you want to go ahead and turn there. It is good to be back, and again, as Don Montgomery already mentioned, I really do appreciate Scott and Mike and Jack preaching in my absence. I always kind of wonder what it's going to be like when we get back August the 1st. We've been here 19 years now, and every August, first week of August, come back like this. And I wonder someday if it's not going to be like what I experienced years ago when we had not married yet. I was living in North Alabama and was going to a small Bible college there. And someone at the school got a call one week and said, we need somebody to preach at our church that Sunday, and thought maybe a student or somebody could come. And so some fellow out of the office came and asked me to do that. I think I had preached maybe twice. And so got up early Sunday morning and thought I knew about where that was, that church, and made my way toward Huntsville, Alabama, and then right up the mountain there to where I thought that church was. And sure enough, got to the church building, and it was a little larger than what I had envisioned. It was a large red brick building, and most of or at least the two churches I had preached at before were white frame with a screen door on the front. And nevertheless, I went in that red brick building and walked in, and there were all kinds of people there. And I kind of looked around for the person. Anytime there's a guest speaker, usually there's a person that's looking for that guest speaker. And nobody seemed to be looking for me. And so I sat down in the auditorium Bible class, and they went on with class, and I sat there through class and then got up after class. Nobody was looking for me, and finally I decided it's probably time I start asking. And I walked up to this nice-looking fellow there in their foyer, and I said, I introduced myself, and I said, I'm Jim Martin, and I'm supposed to preach here this morning, and could you just point me in the right direction? And he said, that's funny, I'm preaching here too this morning. And I said, well, am I not at such and such church? And he said, well, this is our location, but the church you're looking for is on the other side of the mountain. So, I'm thinking that one of these August weeks, I'm going to walk in here and there's going to be somebody sitting on that second pew, and I'm going to say, hi, what's your name? And then we're going to do that same thing, and I'm going to find out he's preaching here now. Wow. It's good to be here. Good to see you, and hope you've had a good July. And we're going to be unpacking some things this morning, and appreciate you open your Bible to the book of Malachi. All right, here's the statement, and then we're going to work with a lot of this for the next few minutes. Here is the statement. Good news. In Jesus, nobody has to remain stuck. Good news. In Jesus, nobody has to remain stuck. That in Jesus, there is the power to grow as a man, as a woman, as a husband, as a wife, as a mom, as a dad, to grow as someone who is going to work tomorrow, to grow in terms of your leadership ability, if that fits you, whether that's at work or at church. Nobody has to remain stuck. It doesn't take long in Dallas traffic before I remember why I love here, one of the reasons why I love living here so much. I remember at one point during the month of July sitting, I think it was on I-35, and it was at a crawl. And you know how that is. You wait, and these cars are zipping along on the right-hand side. Where are they going? Well, they've got the right, to go around and kind of butt in there and all that. And you kind of watch all that, and then you kind of wait, and finally you start moving forward. Well, I want to tell you, I really believe, and I am under such conviction that this is true after several months now, not only July, but June and May, of spending a lot of time in the Gospels and spending a lot of time, one more time, looking at the ministry of Jesus. I am really convinced that all of us can move forward. All of us can move forward. Now, a couple of things I want to mention. I want to say something about kind of what I did in July, and then we want to talk a little bit about our church, and then we're going to go into the book of Malachi. Some of you know, but just for clarity's sake, for those of you who are visiting, every July I'm away for, Charlotte and I are away for a month, and a couple of weeks of that is just vacation. But a couple of weeks of that is some very valuable study time, getting ready not only for the next semester, but the next year, next academic year, in terms of what I preach and teach, and just kind of thinking through. I did a lot of thinking about why do I do what I do. That's good to ask yourself, and to pray through. Why do I do what I do? What's the point? Asking questions like that. Asking questions like, how am I doing in my own obedience to Jesus and in the life I'm experiencing in Him? How am I doing? I mean, you would hope the guy who would be teaching and preaching the bulk of the time would be asking those kind of questions, right? Any kind of leadership starts with dealing with yourself, right? That's true of a mom or dad, by the way. So did a lot of that, and just that involved a lot of reading, and involves 4 significant conversations with a couple of ministers and teachers at Christian college, and did some of that. I also gave a lot of thought to just who we are as a church and who you are. Some of you know that on a Wednesday evening before I left, I took a little survey of that class, and others of you who weren't in that class also participated. I think this will be interesting to you. You were asked, for instance, what the strengths of this congregation happened to be. You know what the number one strength that you mentioned was? You basically said, I love the way this church serves people. I mean, that's hands down. That's what people said again and again. Number one strength. You know what the number 2 was? Life groups. Our life group ministry, and what different ones are experiencing. And I realize that the quality of what happens in those groups may be varied. But there is a significant number of people who mentioned those 2. Third, some of you mentioned children's ministry, some of you mentioned youth. But hands down, it was those first 2. I asked the question, where have you grown most in your walk with Jesus in the previous year? You know what it was? Again, this was said again and again and again. My prayer life. I feel like I've grown. And then, the one area where more of you said that you needed to grow than any other area was patience. Some of you said patience just with my life and what's not happening right now, or what is happening. Some of you said patience with my spouse, patience with my children, patience with my aging parents, I think some people said. One day I got this directory, I took this church directory, and I began with the first name, Larry and Melissa Adams, and I read through aloud each one of these names and each name of your children, down to Ray Ziegler at the end. And I just wanted to read those aloud and to pray through this group. And it's funny, but even the act of reading those aloud, and as I would read them aloud, I would think about just what I know about some of you, and kind of what you're dealing with and what your year has been like. And I guess what I'm saying is, what I'm going to unpack this morning, that we'll be doing over the next number of months, is not just something I came up with in a library somewhere. But it has everything to do with who we are as a church, what our mission is, and this time and this place. Okay? Well, turn, if you would, to Malachi 1. Malachi 1. The book of Malachi is the last book in the Older Testament. It's the book right before the blank page. It's the book right before the next title page that says the New Testament. And Malachi is this book that at first glance may not be all that encouraging because it's pretty pointed in some places. But I want you to hear the first 5 verses, and I hope you've got your Bible in front of you. A prophecy of the Lord to Israel through Malachi. I have loved you, says the Lord. But you ask, how have you loved us? Was not Esau Jacob's brother, declares the Lord? Yet I have loved Jacob, but Esau I have hated, and have turned his hill country into a wasteland, and left his inheritance to the desert jackals. Edom may say, though we have been crushed, we will rebuild the ruins. But this is what the Lord Almighty says. They may build, but I will demolish. They will be called the wicked land, a people always under the wrath of God. You will see it with your own eyes and say, great is the Lord, even beyond the borders of Israel. God says to his people, I have set my love on you, not the descendants of Esau. It's you who are my people. Now, by the way, they were going to be a people who were to be a light to the nations. But it's God it's Israel who God was preparing and was going to use. And then he starts unpacking all of this mess, and it's in the book of Malachi. First of all, in chapter 1 and verse 2, he indicates that, I think there's an indication here that evidently they're skeptical, or unsure at least, of God's love. In chapter 1, verse 7, they're careless in worship. Chapter 2, verses 6 through 7, they're evidently indifferent to truth. In fact, turn, if you would, to look at chapter 2, verse 6. Well, it's a great passage, but let's don't go there. Let's go to verse 7. At one point, the visitor is saying, and he's your regular minister? Chapter 1 and verse 7. Verse 6, basically, God points out that these people have shown contempt for his name. And they've done this, verse 7, by offering defiled food on the altar. But you ask, how have we defiled you? By saying that the Lord's table is contemptible. When you offer blind animals for sacrifice, is that not wrong? When we're taking up canned goods to give out to the neighborhood, and your idea of bringing canned goods is to gather up all the turnip greens and Brussels sprouts because you don't like them anyway, and you call that giving? He said, you bring your blind animals, the animals that aren't good for anything, and you bring those to my altar. Try offering them to your governor. Would he be pleased with you? Would he accept you? Verse 9, now plead with God to be gracious to us. With such offerings from your hands, will he accept you, says the Lord Almighty? And here's verse 10, which those of us who are sitting in church buildings don't like to hear. Oh, that some of you, or that one of you would shut the temple doors, so that you would not light unless useless fires on my altar. I am not pleased with you, says the Lord Almighty. How would you like it if you came to the church building next week and there was a big old sign on the door that says, we've decided our assemblies do more harm than good, closed until further notice. And that is what the Lord says. And God, in being very pointed to these people, says, I want you to remember something very, very important. This is what I want you to remember taking away. I want you to remember that I love you. This is chapter 1, verses 1 through 5. I want you to remember that I love you. And second, I want you to remember that I am great. Look at verse 5 again. Chapter 1, verse 5. Great is the Lord, even beyond the borders of Israel. I want you to remember my love, and I want you to remember my greatness. We're going to spend lots of time in the Gospels. Here's what we're going to see. The incomprehensible love of Jesus toward you and me and his people collectively. Absolutely incomprehensible. And second, we're going to see the unrivaled greatness of Jesus. The unrivaled greatness of Jesus. We were in some very good assemblies while we were gone. But there was this one we went to, and I remember during one particular song, it just felt odd. Just really felt odd. I wish I could remember the song. But it was a song that, what I do remember, the words basically were talking about how great God is. And we were sitting about the halfway point, kind of where Norman is right now, or Bill. We were sitting about there, and so I kind of looked over to the side. And this is the way it felt. Our God is great. I thought, we're singing the right words, but we sound dead. This song may die right in the middle of things. It just felt odd. It felt odd to be saying words that were powerful when it kind of looked like we were about to go to sleep. I don't know, is it anybody's birthday today? We won't do this right now. I don't know if it's somebody's birthday. But it'd be kind of like us surrounding, Mark Waneke's wearing yellow here, that's easy to spot. It'd be kind of like us surrounding Mark Waneke and say, okay, let's all sing happy birthday, and I'm going to start. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Mark. Happy birthday to you. And he's thinking, what is up with him? You say, what's wrong? I sang happy birthday. Yeah, but what happens to God's people sometimes is we find ourselves saying the right words, but the tone betrays our hearts. So I come up here to the podium. Everybody knows that God's number one in my life, and we love the Lord. He's first, and he gives us great joy. You think, buddy, what is that about? That's not even you. I don't know if this communicates or not, and if it doesn't, it's not you, it's me. But I am telling you, that is not something to just pass over lightly. It's kind of like when you say, I love you, and your children or your spouse says, you know, I hear the words, but you're not home. And I don't know what's going on. On the back of your order of worship, we're going to walk through something in just a minute, but I want you to be ready for that. I think very often our sluggishness and our lethargy is a real problem that we try to address superficially. Sometimes we're sluggish as Christians or maybe as a church, and somebody says, well, we just need better Bible classes. Well, we just need that. We just need better songs. Sing the old songs. Sing the new songs. You know, sing something that makes me feel good. We just need a better sermon. You know, better. You know, that may be true, but we just need better preaching. Or somebody says, well, can't we do something with the building? Or somebody says, well, can't we have better vision? Or can't we have something that will make us feel alive? Or can't we have better elders? And it just goes on and on and on. And I'm telling you, I'm not scolding you at all. This is where I am sometimes. I am convinced that the answer to sluggishness and lethargy and sin is by going back to the story of Jesus. It is by going back to Matthew and Mark and Luke and John. Now, if you're like some of us, you'll hear those words and you'll say, I know all those stories. I know all that. Oh, yeah, I know all that. Really? I think that says a whole lot more about you than it does the Gospels. I'm telling you that when I go back to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John to hear the gospel within the Gospels, to hear the story of Jesus, and to look at his life and his miracles and his teachings, and I start asking this question: what would this look like if I seriously attempted to obey him this week? What would this look like at State Farm and at Baylor and at the elementary school? What would this look like at Midway or Waco High? What would this look like when I'm gathering with my friends for coffee if I seriously tried to obey this aspect of Jesus' teaching this week? What would it look like? Well, I want to tell you, one of the things that happens to us when we get stuck and we're not moving. I'll mention 3 of them now. Sometimes we just find ourselves doing what I suggested a moment ago. We go through the motions. We go through the motions. Has anybody ever started their car? I mean, you sat in the parking lot and you started your car and all of a sudden you were at Walmart parking lot or H-E-B parking lot. Has that ever happened to you and you do not remember the trip? Or you left home to go to work and you ended up at church, or you left home to go to church and you ended up going to work? Now, I guess maybe I'm the only one that's done things like that, but that kind of mindlessness, that happens, doesn't it? You ever done this with a song? You ever started singing a song and you have no idea what you're singing? You're just on automatic. Cruise control. You know, I hope he does all that real well. I hope it flows real well. I hope it sounds real well. What are we singing? Don't have any idea, but it sounds good. You know, just cruising along. Sometimes when we're stuck, we just get on automatic. We're on automatic. Now, second, sometimes when we're stuck, we may find ourselves pinching off Lord's Suppers, drinking Lord's Supper, but still there's an emptiness. And so what we do, since we don't really desire Jesus all that much, we spend our energy during the week doing the things that do fulfill our other desires. And so you see Dad come alive when he goes to work. You see Mom come alive when she goes to the store. You see, whatever it is. You see because our real desires are not with Jesus. And so when our real desire is not set upon Him, it's going to be set somewhere else. And then third, sometimes we just get apathetic and we don't care. People quit church long before they leave church buildings. You know that. People quit church long before they leave church buildings. Start disconnecting emotionally, start disconnecting from things. Usually, one of the last things to go is an absence from Sunday morning, but they usually have been disconnecting for a long time. One of the challenges I think we face is learning to desire God who reflects these two characteristics: an incomprehensible love and an unrivaled greatness. An incomprehensible love and an unrivaled greatness. What we're going to do in the fall, and probably moving into the new year, is we'll be looking at Jesus, who I believe has a love for us that if we'll receive that love, we're going to find that He becomes more and more attractive and desirable. And I think we're going to find His greatness is going to be far greater than maybe we imagined. My sister has, 4 kids? And my niece is married to a guy who, for the last 8 years, has played pro football. And they live in Houston. And my niece is married to Jordan Black. And Jordan has played pro football with the Kansas City Chiefs for, I think, 5 years, seems like. Then went to Houston for a year, and then Jacksonville. And then last year did not play. Went to camp with New Orleans, was cut, and so did not play at all last year. They go to the First Colony Church in Houston. My niece was saying that last Sunday morning they were in church, and Jordan's phone went off. And not like ringing, but like the vibrating thing. And but he saw that it was, he saw that it was a number he didn't recognize, and went out to take the call. And it was the Washington Redskins. And they said, we have an offensive lineman hurt, and we want you to come, and we want you on a plane today. Jordan hadn't played in a year. Well, the other day I'm with my sister. And my sister's telling me this. And I'm hearing this story. And I'm saying, Becky, he's going to be standing there next to RG3. You understand that? I mean, you talk about front row seat, Heisman Trophy winner. I mean, he's going to be blocking for the guy in practice. And she said, now he may be cut before, he's at the twilight of his career, talking about her son-in-law. He's in the twilight of his career. He knows he may be cut before camp is over with. Doesn't matter. I said, just to be standing there and watching this right there on the field. Now, to some guy like me, that just sounds like I just want to stand there next to him and just watch. But, I get excited just thinking about that. But let me tell you, this just amazes me. That situation absolutely pales in comparison to the idea that we get a front row seat in watching Jesus being lived out today. We get a front row seat to that. If you really believe that He's at work, and if you really believe that He loves people and that He has a mission in this world, and His mission in the world, since He reigns as King, His mission in the world is to begin putting things back together. That is an incredible thing to witness. Now, here's what I'm getting at through all of this. What we're going to do is to spend some time cultivating our desire. It's been hot. I look at that glass of tea, or wherever it is, that glass of tea, I'm ready for it. It's hot. I desire that, like right now. I desire that. What we're going to do this fall is we're going to spend time looking at Jesus. You will hamper yourself if you come at this with the attitude that I know all this stuff. It doesn't. That's whatever. Listen, I'm just telling you that if we can look at Jesus, see His absolute, His love and His might. And I'm using the words from Malachi regarding the Father. You're going to find that He becomes more desirable to you. Let me ask this question. We may have iced tea haters in here. You guys can't play. But if you like iced tea, and it's pretty hot outside, I don't have to talk you into this, do I? Do I have to tell you that this is a desirable thing? No. Now, if this were beets, yes. But not iced tea. Now, I'm telling you, sometimes with Jesus, the way we come at this sometimes is, well, you know you ought to desire Him. Well, you know you ought to love Him. Well, you know you ought to put Him first. And I'm telling you that if you will open up your heart to Him, the ought tos will be pushed back and the desire will come through. Well, let's wrap this up. Here's what we're going to do to begin with. During the month of August, before we get to looking at Jesus Himself, we're going to first of all talk about what does it mean to promote the gospel story. And let me tell you how I'm using the word promote, and this is not original with me at all. Some of us preach the gospel. That is, we articulate the gospel. We articulate the story of Jesus. Promoting the gospel is where in your life you do or say something that makes it easier for a person to see Christ. I'll give an example of this. One of the ways we promote the gospel, and this is mentioned again and again in the New Testament, is by praying for people, and especially people who don't know Christ. Praying for people who don't know Christ. I mean, it's just there again and again and again. There are a number of other ways that we'll talk about, but we'll do this during the month of August, and here's why. It's because if Jesus is that desirable, it honors God when we let others in on this. You know? It honors God when we let others in on this story. Well, On the back of your order of worship, there should be, I think, these 3 sentences. When we have a deep sense of His love for us and His greatness, we will desire Him. You see that? When we have a deep sense of His love for us and His greatness, we will desire Him. Second, when we desire Jesus, we will be excited about following Him. And finally, when we desire Him deeply, certain behaviors will become unattractive, while His character and His teachings will become even more attractive. Okay, now here's the big challenge in all of this, and it's a challenge for me as well. Here's the challenge. I want to challenge you, and I want to challenge myself to spend the next few months paying attention to Jesus. And that means not only in these assemblies as we talk about Him and His story, but at home. If you're reading through Matthew or Mark or Luke or John, I would encourage you to select a gospel, does not matter which one, but begin reading through that gospel. I'm reading through John right now, if that says anything. Pay attention to Jesus. One of the biggest struggles that we have as a congregation and as families is that we are a distracted church, and we are distracted as families. I love you guys. I mean that, and I honestly believe we mean well. I know we do. And I know most of us want to do right. But what's going to happen in a few weeks, you know what's going to happen. School's going to get started and all this swirl and everything's going on. And you just kind of find your good intentions are just kind of left behind. Pray that you will be attentive to Jesus. All right, here's the take home for this week. Number 1, I want to encourage you to be thinking about Jesus this week and why He's desirable to you. Now, if you don't do any of these, why he ought to be desirable, that's foul ball, that's 5-yard penalty, whatever. That's like looking at a plate of beets and saying, "I'll tell you why we ought to eat those." Well, there are a lot of things you ought to do, but let's talk about what it is. Not why ought He be desirable, but why is He? Work with that one, okay? Number 1. Number 2, pray this week for what we'll be doing on Sunday mornings, that you will be deeply impacted by Jesus. That you and myself will be deeply impacted by Jesus. Pray about that, okay? And finally, I want to invite you to begin your list of 10. Begin your list of 10. To literally write down 10 people in your life who need Jesus, and you know it. Now, some of those 10 may sit in church buildings every week, right? Sitting in a church building doesn't make you a Christ follower. It's a pretty good atmosphere, but it doesn't make you a Christ follower alone, just sit in a building. Some of those 10, a couple of those may be people who, in your own unbelief, you'll think, man, there's no way they'll ever come to the Lord. Go ahead and put them down anyway. 10 people. Well, I'm going to bring this up again. But begin that, okay? Literally write down 10 people. I'll be doing it with you. Okay? And you guys too. Literally write down 10 people. Well, you've been very patient. Thank you so much. I think I was a junior in college, and I had just come home from Denton. I pulled my car in the garage. I was having a lot of trouble with that car. Smelled gas. Gas odor was strong. Pulled my car in the garage there. that little red brick house, 1948 Alhambra there in Pleasant Grove, part of Dallas. And my mother's dryer was in that garage, and it was a gas dryer. And I got out of my car, and I heard something in her dryer. The thing was between cycles, and it kicked into another cycle. And when it did, there were just flames everywhere. And I ran in the house, got my mother and brother come out, and we ran outside. The neighbors started running across the street. I'm standing out there watching our house burn up. I just feel horrible. I mean, it's, my car. I mean, you know what that would be like. I'm standing there watching my house burn up. My poor daddy coming home from work, looking at his house up in flames. Well, I'm just standing there watching this and can't do a thing. I mean, it's way beyond going in and getting things. And then a Dallas police car shows up. And then I could hear this siren in the distance. And it just seemed like it took forever to get there. Probably just took a few minutes. And there was this, and the siren got louder and louder and louder. And I looked down the street, and I could see this smaller vehicle in front and two fire engines behind him. And the smaller vehicle came in quickly. And this is what I remember. I remember a man sitting in the passenger seat, had his gear on, had his helmet on. And I remember seeing his eyes. And his eyes were totally focused on that house. And I saw his eyes shift, and I saw him barking something into what I guess was a communication device. And it felt very intense. Well, they did the best they could, and the house basically burned up, and we moved out, and they rebuilt the house and all of that. But what I remember is that when that man, representing all those firefighters, when that man came to our house, we had his full attention. And that's what I want to invite you to give to Jesus. I need some of you to be praying about this. If you'll pray about what we'll be doing this fall and spring, if you'll be praying about just the need to give our attention to Jesus, I want to ask you to email me this week. Do it today if you would. If you will commit to pray about this, let me know you're doing that. Be praying about your own attention. His love is incredible. His greatness is unrivaled. And when we come close to Him, there will be a new desire for Him. I don't know how to say this any differently unless we just all. I'd love to sit down with you one-on-one or family on me, or I'd love to. But only way I know to do this practically is in a room like this where we all do this at one time. This is absolutely critical. And guys, if you're stuck anywhere in your life, and you know you are, this is where you start. Start with the teacher, the master, the one who is king. Well, let's take a moment to sing. If you need the prayer of the church here, I would encourage you to go to our elders and let them pray for you. If you got a concern about your children, your marriage, your parents, whatever it is, ask them to pray for you. If you're stuck, You don't have to explain to them what you're stuck in. Just pray that through Jesus and His power that you'll get unstuck. If you're a guest this morning, listen, I want to encourage you. Come back. Come back. And in the meantime, be praying that the Lord will work on you. Okay, let's stand and sing for a moment.
This is my desire.